On Point Tote is a modern patchwork bag that is perfectly sized for a day out with the family shopping or maybe a trip to the farmer's market. It has really fun patchwork details, and I'm going to teach you how to draft the patchwork yourself, and then we're going to top it off with a pom-pom button and tassel. The On Point Tote instruction PDF is going to describe to you exactly the amount of fabric that you need to complete the bag. But I've got 3 different styles of prints chosen for the outer bag. You'll also want some lining material. I've got my cutting mat, rotary cutter, and a couple of cutting rulers. I also have straight pins, some interfacing, some batting because we're going to machine quilt the bag as well, and also some marking tools. Finally, I have some pretty selections of yarns to make the pom-pom and the tassel. To begin drafting the pattern for the patchwork front of your tote, we're going to start with the interfacing. I have a 20 by 26 piece of interfacing here, and I'm going to draw some simple lines, marking points and drawing angles using my quilting ruler. First, I'm going to mark the top edge with a line that runs parallel to this top edge, and this is 26 inches long here. But this line is going to be a 1/2 inch away from the top edge. And I've just got a simple ballpoint pen here. Now I'm going to find the halfway point across here, and that's going to be 13 inches. So I just want the 13 to line up on the edge here. And I'm going to mark right here. And then I'm going to slide the ruler down towards the bottom and get another mark 13 inches away from the side edge. And then I can draw a line between my 2 points. And that's your center line. Once you have your center line drawn, it's also time to draw some borders. We need a 3-inch border down both sides. So I'm just going to slide the ruler over until the 3-inch line is at the left edge here and draw a line. Now I'm going to do the same on the right side. I'm also going to draw a 3-inch border at the bottom. The next thing you're going to do is find the halfway point between the center line and this side border line. And that is 10 inches. So at 5 inches, I am going to draw another vertical line. And do the same thing on this side. All right, so I have 4 sections, but from these points, I'm going to draw the triangles of our patchwork. So I'm going to begin by drawing the center triangle. So I'm going to pass the ruler through this intersection and this next intersection here. And then I'm going to tilt it the other way to get the next one. This intersection here and this one down here. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing over here on the left side. So this pretty geometric drawing that we have here is sort of the basis for how we're going to build our patchwork patterns. This is actually interfacing that's going to get included in our sewing for the bag front, but it's also going to be how we're going to draft the pattern for these pieces. You might notice that this triangular shape here is exactly the same size as these 2 triangles here. They're just flipped in opposite directions. So we're going to draft a pattern now by laying over other interfacing on top of this to draft a pattern of the triangle, but we're going to then add a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So in other words, making it a 1/4 inch bigger all the way around. And this pattern is going to serve for this position, this one, and this one. And then we're going to draft another pattern that isn't quite a triangle. It's sort of like a half triangle with a blocky edge to it. So we're going to build out this shape with a seam allowance as well. I've already drafted the patterns here just with more interfacing, and you can see this is the side blocky shape. And if I line it up, it meets all edges here, but it's got an extra seam allowance just on the inner side here. And then this shape matches here as well. Be sure you add those seam allowances so that the patchwork is going to fall underneath each of the seams and have plenty of room for the patchwork assembly and then end up to be the correct size. You can see here the choices that I made for fabrics. This one pattern, I cut navy for the center, and then I cut the same pattern out of the florals here. And then this pattern is our blocky triangle. I used it for this fabric on this side and cut it at the same time with this one. I've also cut a 3.5 by 26 inch strip for the bottom. That's going to be the border. So that sort of lays out the entire logic of the bag. You'll also want to refer to your PDF for the instructions on exactly what you need to cut for the back, the lining, as well as the straps. You can assemble the patchwork front of the bag like you would any of your patchwork projects, doing it just with 1/4 inch seam allowances. And remember, those long passes cut on the angle are cut slightly on bias, so make sure you don't stretch out the fabric as you sew. I'm just going to pop a couple of pins in here and then sew with 1/4 inch seam allowances. So there's 2 pieces, and now I'm going to have the 3rd centerpiece attach right here. So you can continue assembling the front right sides together with 1/4 inch seam allowances until the patchwork is complete, and then give it a good pressing. I have my patchwork front complete, nicely pressed, and I layered it up with a piece of batting that's just the same size, and also some interfacing, which I'm going to use actually as the quilt backing to perform the straight line quilting. And since I'm doing quilting now, I also have my extension table attached and my even feed walking foot, as well as the quilting bar to help guide perfect stitches. I'm going to begin my quilting by just following the lines of this patchwork first, and then all subsequent lines will be guided off of that.
Yeah. Go for it. Just go for yourself.
What are you doing to the back of my neck? Lining this quilt bar up with the previous stitch line as I sew the next one is going to make sure that they're parallel. Once you finish quilting the front of the bag, you can layer up the back piece with batting and backing, get it pinned in whatever fashion you need to perform your quilting. It's time to prepare the straps for the assembly of the bag. I already have one finished, and for the other, I have 2 pieces cut, 2.5 inches by 25 inches, and the same size for 1 piece of interfacing. I'm just gonna layer the 2 strap pieces together, right sides together, and then also interfacing on top. And then I'm gonna sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance down each side. Once you finish both sides of the strap, you can turn it towards the right side. So I have the strap turned out, pressed, and I've also just finished top stitching both sides of it. So now I want to show you how I sewed the lining. All I did was put the 2 20 by 26 pieces together with their right sides facing. I sewed down one side with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, turned the corner, and stopped a few inches shy of the center. I did the same thing on the other side, so that I've left an opening in the center bottom of the lining. The other thing that I did was I made a box corner by aligning the side seam and the bottom seam with their seam allowances pressed open, measuring a 4.5-inch line across, and then making sure that they're together. I sew across and trim. We're gonna do the same thing now with the outer bag pieces by putting their right sides together. But this time, we're not gonna leave an opening on the bottom. We are going to sew all the way from the top of one side down, all the way across the bottom and back up to the top again. Now that I have the front and back assembled to one another and the seams pressed open, I'm creating a box corner by aligning the side pressed open seams with the bottom edge seams. And I've measured a line that's 4.5 inches wide here and drawn with my pen, and that's how I'm gonna stitch across and create the box corner. So now I can trim this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance approximately, just to get rid of all that bulk. And we're gonna do the same thing on the other side to complete the outer bag. Now that I have both box corners done on the outer bag, I'm gonna flip it through to the right side. And I've left my lining wrong sides out. But before I attach the lining and the outer bag, I'm gonna place the straps and baste to them. So I'm just gonna take one strap, and I like just marking off the center to make sure that they're in place. Where you place the straps is really up to you, but just about at 3 inches off of center, that inner side of the strap works out pretty well. So I've got this one set at 3 inches from the inner edge of the strap here, and I'm gonna pin it in place. And then I'm also gonna measure 3 inches to the center of the side and pin this one in place. I'm just gonna baste at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And now we're gonna do the same thing on the other side of the bag. Now that we have the straps basted on the back and the front of the bag, we're gonna insert the outer bag into the lining so that their right sides are together, matching up the side seams, pinning it in place, keeping the straps free of the sewing edge, and sewing all the way around the top perimeter. I created this button loop by first cutting a 6.5 inch by 1 inch length and then doubled it over twice and did a top stitch. I'm gonna fold it in half now and place it at the center back between the lining. I'm gonna pin it in place and include it in this top assembly step. All right, so I've completed that step of sewing all the way around the top perimeter of the bag, and it's time now to fish out the outer bag through the hole that we've left in the lining, and we're gonna pull everything through to the right side. Now that we can see the right sides of both the lining and the outer bag, we're gonna place the lining wrong sides together here, and I'm just gonna do a top stitch to close up that opening. Once you have the opening closed, you can insert the entire lining down into the outer bag, situate everything into place, and once pressed, you can perform a top stitch all the way around the perimeter at about a 1/4 inch away from the edge of the bag. Now that the entire bag assembly is complete, we can concentrate on those cute little finishing details. I've actually decided to make a pom-pom and have that stand in place of a button. And then I've also made a tassel to throw onto this little loop here for an extra detail. So I'm gonna show you how to make a pom-pom out of some pretty colors of wool that I have here, but really you could use scrap wool from any of your knitting or crochet projects. Let me set the bag aside just a little bit and choose colors that I want for the pom-pom. I'm just gonna pull, say, 4 of these 6 colors here to include in the pom-pom. And really all I need is my own hands, the wool, and some scissors to create it. If you wanted to make a larger pom-pom, you could start off with actually 2 empty toilet paper tubes, but I'm gonna show you how to do this just around my hand. I've unwound 4 of the colors here that I want to use for my pom-pom, and I'm going to begin the pom-pom by wrapping them around my 2 fingers, and I'm just going to keep them spread out, keeping the yarn smooth as I go. I have 1 extra length here that I have doubled over. It's probably about a total of 20 inches, but once doubled over, it's about 10. I'm going to pass the loop through one side, and then the 2 ends I'm going to pass over the other side and then through the loop. And I'm going to keep pulling until it's tightened up. I'm going to wrap 1 more time around. And keep pulling. And then the next step is to take my shears and clip those big loops out. On one side, and then I'm going to do it on the lower loops as well. Careful not to cut yourself. Again, this can easily be performed on 2 rolls of empty toilet papers instead of your 2 fingers. So then you can slide this off your fingers, keep that loop tight, and then you're just gonna essentially trim the pom-pom until it's even all over. Once you've trimmed the pom-pom so that it's pretty close to being a sphere, you can use those ends, thread them into a tapestry needle, and then sew them to anchor it as a button in your bag. To make the tassel, I'm also using some other lengths of wool, and I'm going to use my quilting ruler here to wrap around several times until I've got a nice thickness built up. Once I have several lengths wrapped around the ruler, I'm just going to slide those loops off. I have this extra length of about 18 to 20 inches here, doubled over, and I'm going to slide that underneath. And again, pass the raw ends through the loop to tighten, right in the center of all those loops. That's creating the top of the tassel. And then I'm going to take 1 more length of wool and wrap around to form a head on the top of the tassel. And I'm going to tie a nice tight knot. And once I've done that, I can trim those threads along with all the rest of them at the bottom. And you can continue to clip to shape the bottom edge of the tassel. Once you have the tassel trimmed, you can just do a simple knot at the very top, just a couple inches away from the head of the tassel. And then you can just trim about a ½ inch above that knot. And then you can just loop the tassel through your button loop, or in this case, your pom-pom loop. It's just an extra cute little detail on the loop of this bag. Now you have these really cute handmade details to customize your bag, and you've also learned how to draft your own triangular patchwork pattern. So if you want to change up the size or the dimension of your bag, you are ready to go.